Larry, how are you?
I am well, doing better than the rest of the world. Let's put it that way.
Initial reactions.
You know, this was a vicious and warranted attack by the United States and Israel. There was nothing that Iran could do or say that would have prevented this. The negotiations that took place in Geneva on Thursday, from the Iranian standpoint, was they said, "Hey, we've made progress. We haven't made this much progress before." They're willing to meet again on Monday. And the United States, once again, as happened last June 13th, where they used the promise and lure of future negotiations. In fact, the attack that took place on Friday the 13th, there were supposed to be negotiations on Monday, June 16th.
Yeah.
And instead, what happened? You had another decapitation strike on the Iranian government that caught Iran totally by surprise back then. This latest one wasn't a total surprise. I mean, they expected it, they anticipated it. I don't know why they didn't take more precautions to prevent it. But we're told the United States and Israel couldn't come up with a straight story about what was the problem. Was the problem that Iran allegedly killed 30,000 protesters during a color revolution that was spun up by the United States, an attempt to overthrow the regime in late December, early January? Oh, no. It's had ballistic missiles. That's why we got to get rid of them. No. They're supporting Hamas and Hezbollah. That's why we got to get rid of them. No, the nuclear program that we obliterated, it's back. So, come up with a narrative, stick with it, and at least try to justify why we're doing what we're doing. But then see if you can follow this logic. The one guy in Iran that has been the main reason that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, the one man that for 37 years or 36 years, I forget, it's one of those, has blocked it, prevented it from happening because it's a sin against God, the Ayatollah Khamenei. We kill that guy. So you kill the one guy that's stopping Iran from having a nuclear weapon, and then say, okay, now we're on a roll. This is nothing but madness. It is a self-created fantasy on the part of the West. The entire hatred of Iran is based upon lie after lie after lie. The Americans we're fond of saying, "Oh, Iran's chanting death to America." What have we done? Well, for starters, in 1980, we encouraged Saddam Hussein to invade Iran, and then followed that up with providing Iraq with the chemical precursors used to produce mustard gas, which killed upwards of 300,000 Iranians. Do you recall how angry the United States was on September 12th, the day after 9/11, when we had lost fewer than 4,000 Americans, and we were gonna tear the world apart, particularly Afghanistan and those Muslims? Well, we kill 300,000 Iranians through a proxy. No big deal. Why are they so upset? That's why I said this entire construct of a narrative designed to portray Iran as the destabilizer in the Middle East, when in fact, let's go back to 9/11. Who carried out those attacks? And we'll stay out of the how much did the CIA know and when did it know it and what role did it play. But the perpetrators, whether they were put up to it by the CIA or not, were radical Sunni jihadists. They were not Shia. They had no connection whatsoever with Iran. And so then you get Iran over the last 12 years have been fighting those very terrorists, the ones that attacked the West. You'd think the West would align. So that's what I'm saying. It's one line after another.
It's unnecessary. Yeah, I posted, I think today, I said, this war is unnecessary, needs to stop. Very simply, it is not in America's best interest. It is not in the region's best interest. It's not in Iran's best interest. Now, it depends on what the objective is. And talking about, Lisa, you can put that footage up now with the naval facility that was struck. We're seeing Iran heavily target American bases. In the 12-day war, Iran did not want the US involved. They did not want war with Iran. They gave a warning for that symbolic strike in Qatar. Now there's no symbolism. We're way past symbolism. Let me, Lisa, you can show the footage now of the one where you just sent me now on Telegram. So that's just came in now. That's one of many examples. I think CENTCOM already confirmed US casualties, and we've seen very similar footage. There's just plenty of it, of all the Gulf nations, US allies being struck. So this is a major fire at the US naval facility in Bahrain. What are your thoughts on Iran's firepower so far? The strategy, the military strategy is very different to what we saw in the 12-day war. The 12-day war was overwhelm the Israeli defense system, the air defense system, and then later on it was to exhaust it. Now we're seeing a repeat of that now, but initially it was doing that to the Gulf nations. It was overwhelming the Gulf air defense systems, which actually performed better than expected. And now they're overwhelming Israeli ones, and there's been a lot of damage in Israel, a lot more than the Gulf nations. What do you think is Iran's end game here to try to end this?
They're going to force a surrender of the West. The United States, despite our claims to the contrary, I don't believe it has the staying power to sustain a 2 to 3 month war of attrition. We've already seen last March Operation Rough Rider in the Red Sea, where you had 2 aircraft carriers. You had total U.S. air supremacy and total control over the air of Yemen. And with the stated objective of we were going to reestablish freedom of navigation and eliminate the Houthi missile threat. We tried for 7 weeks and then gave up. One of the reasons we gave up is because it was becoming extremely costly. That operation, in terms when you add up the loss, the 3 F-18s loss, and then the 7 Predator drones, the MQ-9 Reapers, that were lost in a 7-week period, and then add into that the previous 15 or 16 that had been lost, right? Those drones go for $35 million a piece. So when you lose say 25, all of a sudden you're talking well over $700 million, and then you add in the F-18s, you're up to close to $1 billion. And we failed to achieve those objectives. So the United States right now is involved with something that's far more costly. The ability of the naval force that's south with the Abraham Lincoln to project force is limited. And apparently there's reports out today that the Abraham Lincoln was attacked, that maybe one of its company ships to screen it was sunk or severely damaged, and it's retiring from the area. And this comes back to the naval base in Bahrain, because that's basically has been the headquarters for the 5th Fleet of the United States Navy. The destroyers, they carry a package of missiles. They're like 50 in the front, the bow of the ship, and 46 in the stern. These are cells that are built into the deck, and when they open up, a missile can be fired out of it. And they got if they're in a defensive posture, they're carrying nothing but Aegis missiles to defend against incoming drones and missiles. If they're in an offensive capability, they'll carry, say, 50 Tomahawk cruise missiles, and then they got 46 air defense missiles. Once they fire them, you just can't send a bunch of sailors up on deck carrying a new missile to plop it in the hole. Oh no. They made sure that these were impossible to service at sea, that you have to sell into a port. Previously, they would sell into Bahrain, where the port facilities there, where they could reload, refit, and re-equip the U.S. naval vessels. Now they can't do that. Their nearest base to do that is Diego Garcia, which is a 3-day journey at least from their position right now in the Arabian Sea. So, and that's just one aircraft carrier. We don't have 2 in the Arabian Sea. And their ability to launch deep into Iran is limited because the Tomahawk cruise missile reportedly has a range of only 1,000 miles. And these ships have been trying to stay some distance offshore. I don't know the precise distance. Is it 100 miles? Is it 500 miles? But let's say if
I think
it's
it's about
500,
800. I think it's about 800 kilometers. Not sure
oh,
what that is in
okay, yeah, that's
miles.
about 500 miles. So, that means that the range of that Tomahawk cruise missile, that it can only go 500 miles inland in Iran, and that's not a great distance. Plus, Iran is just it's a big country. It's 4 times the size of Iraq, and you think back at the kind of difficulties we had securing Iraq, with far more. We actually had troops on the ground. This time we won't have troops on the ground. So yeah, air power, it can kill people, it can cause a lot of destruction, but it's limited what it can do, and then it carries with it a cost for the United States in terms of the more they use these aircraft, the more they fly, the more maintenance, and the F-35 sadly is known as a hangar queen, coming down with a lot of maladies from time to time that prevent it from being fully operational and sustaining operations over a period of time.
What is the biggest risk for the US right now militarily when it comes to Iran? Is it a hypersonic missile targeting the aircraft carriers? Is it the Iranian drones, sea drones targeting the fleet? Is it the ballistic missiles, a big barrage of ballistic missiles targeting the US bases? Or is it the strategy of targeting US allies and maybe eventually oil refineries in the Gulf, and then Gulf nations pressure Trump?
Can we say all of the above? You've given a great summary of what, it's not just one, it's all of those. So we found out today that Iran is deadly serious about shutting down oil coming out of the Straits of Hormuz. So I doubt it would target or challenge Chinese tankers. Bless you. Tankers that are headed to China. But for U.S. and Europe, they're not getting out of the Gulf. So we'll have to wait. The markets are supposed to open up here in Asia in about 2.5 hours. So we'll see. We've got an early warning sign of what is this doing, not just to the oil market. I suspect that we're going to see oil spike up $20, maybe more, and so that is going to be an economic shock for the world. Commodity prices on gold and silver, those are likely also to continue to skyrocket. So the economic spillover of this is going to be significant. And what Iran is now doing in decimating the U.S. bases in these various countries, the Gulf Arabs, the Saudis, the Kuwaitis, the Bahrainis, the Qataris, and the Emiratis, they've gotten away with basically giving the United States carte blanche to do what they want in the region. And Iran warned, don't do this. And the United States and Israel, they launched an unprovoked attack. It'd be one thing if Iran had been out, refusing to negotiate, refusing to make any compromises on some issues. But instead, it was the West that didn't want to take yes for an answer. And Trump foolishly believes that the United States has this massive military power that we can sustain operations. Right now, that U.S. aircraft carrier, the Gerald Ford, it's going to have to pull out within a week or two, and then they got to bring the George H.W. Bush over, I guess, to replace it. Same ditto for the Lincoln. It's got a limited power. The air defense missiles, those are in limited supply. If you watch what Israel's been firing, good Lord, it looks like they're firing 100 to 200 Patriots a day right now, and they're mostly ineffective. The United States only produces between 700 and 800 Patriot missiles a year, not a week, not a month, a year. So if Israel is using up, let's say 100 a day, because they'll fire 2 Patriot missiles for every single inbound Iranian target, well, just do the math. If they're firing 100 a day in 8 days, they've used, in literally a little more than a week, they've used up an entire year's supply. And the United States doesn't have great reserves.
So I've heard of that issue of munition depletion, U.S. munitions being depleted. And it's been talked about for a long time now, since the Ukraine war. But then why would the US get into this war? And now Trump is talking about this war lasting a month if the munitions don't allow him to sustain it.
You're making a great assumption, and I admire your optimism. I call it the optimism of youth, that there's rational thinking and planning going on. I mean, yeah, you know, you're not some great military expert, but you understand it. It's very simple. This is not complicated. And yet in their arrogance, they just keep telling themselves, oh, we got the greatest military ever. No, we got the most expensive military. We're far from the greatest. It's been a long time since the United States has actually won a war against somebody who could fight back. And that's the real danger here with Iran's strength, is that they've got these massive underground cities, missile cities they're called. Now, the United States has destroyed quite a few of the launchers. They've got mobile, they had some fixed site launchers, those have been destroyed. But Iran's now moving around with mobile launchers, and that's going to be more difficult for the U.S. to find, locate, and destroy simply because they are mobile. And that was the same problem the U.S. ran into in Yemen back in March of 2025. It's because it's one thing to have a satellite system to say, okay, at this geo coordinate, we can see this launcher. Let's go there. Well, you order an airplane or a cruise missile, there's a time distance problem. It's not, Star Trek where it instantly appears. It has to fly there. Well, as it's flying there, time passes, say 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Well, the idea of a mobile launcher is you set up, you launch, and you boot and scoot. You take off. And so all of a sudden we get there to blow it up and it's gone. And we've seen this repeatedly going back to, good Lord, 36 years ago to the Gulf War. In Iraq, we couldn't scud hunters couldn't find them,
especially in Iran's rugged territory. It makes it for a good, very, very good strategy, and they could do this on the coastline, targeting the American Armada. News just came in. Starmer just announced that Britain will allow the U.S. to use the spaces for quote limited and defensive purposes. So Europe has been very clearly out of the war. There seems to be a change of strategy here. Saudi said something similar earlier today. They said if the attacks continue, they'll be joining the war.
So ask yourself this question: if the war is going so great for the United States and Israel, I mean, we're winning, why you need all this extra help? Huh? Why need you tell the Saudi, hey, stay on the sidelines, man. We got this. Tell the Brits, no, we don't need your help. We're doing great. This is a sign of how bad it's going for the United States.
What do you make of the Iranian missiles that were targeting Cyprus? They didn't strike Cyprus, but Cyprus does house thousands of British troops. They do also house CIA bases there as well. Yeah. You probably know this better than I with your background. Is that more of a warning shot? Is it accidental? Obviously, I don't think it's accidental. You can't strike Cyprus on the way to Bahrain. So I'm not trying to make sense of that strike.
Oh, no. They're going after the entire infrastructure. Let's recall that in 2003, when the United States invaded Iraq, they basically took control of the Mujahideen al-Khalq, a foreign terrorist organization that was on the list, U.S. State Department list of foreign terrorist organizations. And my CIA brethren discovered that, hey, the MEC were quite willing to carry out terrorist attacks against the Iranians. Well, all of a sudden, they became our best friend. CIA set the MEC up in Albania at training camps where they had some protection. So what we're seeing with going after Cyprus, and I anticipate that they'll also go after Albania. And Iran now has ballistic missiles capable of reaching that far. And this initial strike at Cyprus may have been an attempt just to smoke out the air defense system, cause them to use up some missiles that they can't afford to lose. And then they'll put the heavier, better stuff on it later. But they're attacking the full scope of U.S. military operations. And yeah, we're doing some damage to them. The West is doing some damage. I don't want to say we, because I don't like to associate myself with what's going on. I think it's a war crime. But they're fighting back. They're fighting back effectively. And as you recall, in June, they were just dealing with Israel. Now they are covering a hole. They're hitting to the south after the Abraham Lincoln. They're going at all of the different, at least 10 different military bases that are scattered around from Erbil up in Iraq, down through Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, and the Emiratis. And at the same time, they're hitting Israel. So they're showing that they can walk and chew gum at the same time, even though they've suffered some military losses. They've had some leadership killed. But, the West forgets that when we encouraged Saddam Hussein to start that war back in 1980, 81, they fought a 9-year war. They lost over 300,000 people. Iran knows how to fight a war of attrition. They proved it before. And now what we demonstrated is the United States does not have any longer the industrial capability to fund a war of attrition. We simply do not. And it's compounded by the fact that China now has restricted the rare earth minerals, which are critical ingredients in many of these weapon systems. So they literally can't be produced. Like right now, several of the new F-35As, they're carrying around, if you've gone to a local like Gold's Gym or Crunch Gym, they got the weight plates. They got the 80-pound of weight plates stuck in the nose of the jet to compensate for the radar that's not there. So, like I said, there's some real industrial challenges that are going to weigh in the longer this goes on, and the same for Israel. It's going to severely interrupt their economy.
What do you think works best in terms of pressuring Trump to tackle, to find a way out of this? Is it, and this is, by the way, so that's report, secondary explosions likely from an Iranian one-way attack drone striking U.S. air defense system in Erbil, in Iraq, in the Kurdistan region. There you go.
Yeah. Well, Trump has got a problem. He wants to prevail militarily. The United States will not prevail militarily in this. In part because they've created a lie and are believing their own lie. There is a group out of the Netherlands, Gaman, Gamaan, who is partnered up with a VPN outfit in Canada. And as I dug into it, I said, well, where are they getting their money from? Well, their money's coming from National Endowment for Democracy and USAID. Both have been used as, I'll call them, open front companies for the CIA. And they specifically were tasked with creating polls to show that the Iranian regime was falling out of favor. And lo and behold, they did. They showed their polls resulted that 81% of Iranians couldn't wait to get rid of the Ayatollah. But there was other polling that was done by the Maryland Institute of International Security, I believe is its correct title. They found the exact opposite. I mean, 180-degree opposite. And as we're seeing, if you're watching any of the videos coming out of Iran today, the streets throughout the country are filled with millions of mourners of the Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, are there people in Iran that oppose the Islamic rule? Oh, absolutely, they exist, but they're a minority.
There's sorry to interrupt you. There's a speech giving. There's Trump giving a speech, and I thought I'd tell you the highlights of the speech. He did an address to the nation. There will likely be more U.S. casualties. The U.S. will avenge the deaths of Americans. This is him admitting there will be American casualties. Combat operations in Iran will continue. And then he says, I urge IRGC, Iranian military, to lay down your arms or face certain death. Again, these are statements that will be expected. There's more statements coming in right now. The entire Iranian military command is gone, and the rest wants to surrender. I call on the IRGC and the armed forces to lay down their weapons or face death. To the Iranian people, I delivered on my promise, but the rest is up to you. Take back your country. Yeah. So is that just the next step in a regime change, or is that him slowly stepping away and saying, I've done my work? It's a very interesting statement. I delivered on my promise, but the rest is up to you. Does that mean this is it?
Yeah, no, you're thinking exactly as I am. That's an early sign of how he's going to get out of this. They'll ultimately come back and say, hey, we teed it up for them. We gave them everything they want, and these Iranians didn't rise up like they were supposed to do regime change. and making these threats against the IRGC. He doesn't understand that for an Iranian Shia Muslim, martyrdom is not something to be feared. Martyrdom is a blessing. They're not thinking like the West, like the secular West. The religious martyrs are as a concept understood in Christianity as well. But in the secular world where there's no religion, we dismiss it as unimportant. These people are fervent believers, and they actually believe that God is on their side and that the will of Allah will prevail. And so if they must die, they must die. It is God's will.
I was speaking to Trita Parsi as well on that point. There were reports coming out. It came out of Israeli media, but Trita Parsi said there's other sources as well, that Trump did offer Iran, not an olive branch, but the ability or opportunity to negotiate a ceasefire. And the report said that Iran refused those requests. Now, I took those with a grain of salt. Israel may want to portray Iran as the aggressor. But then when I spoke to Trita, who's very critical of the regime, he said, no, Maria, there's more sources saying that, and I know it's true. I spoke to people in the administration. So what do you make of this? Why would Trump be seeking it? Why would Iran be refusing it if Iran's been saying for a while now they want they don't want war?
When was that agreement offer made?
Early. That was allegedly that was made a few hours ago. My only understanding is that Iran, they need to inflict as much damage as possible to the US and their allies, mainly the US, in order to ensure this is the last war. Because we saw with the 12-day war, they took the first peace deal that was offered, and here we are again.
How could you, on what basis could you trust any offer from the United States? We already have demonstrated that last Thursday, after the talks, Arachi came out, he was upbeat. Hey, we're making some progress. The United States says, we'll meet you on Monday. And they did the exact same thing they did on June 13th, 2025, where there's supposed to be good faith negotiations on Monday, the 16th of June. And instead, Israel launched this attack that initially Trump denied it. And then he said, oh, I knew all about it. The United States knew it was going to happen. The reason Trump now is offering a ceasefire, let's have a truce, is because Iran is shut down the Strait of Hormuz. There's going to be severe economic damage to the West.
I'm just surprised, but Larry, they would have expected this, no? Like, I'm just surprised that if you're threatening a regime change and you assassinate the leader of the country, of course they're going to shut down the Strait of Hormuz if this is their best card.
Yeah. Well, there you go again, being rational and logical, because I had spoken to and had communications with some folks who are in the U.S. military. They're not, low-level guys. And they really believe their own propaganda. They believe that Iran was weak, that Iran was fragile, that Iran was on the verge of collapse, that all we had to do was apply a little pressure, and that Iran couldn't fight back against our massive force. And I said, guys, and they assess, we assess that Iran has only like 3,000 ballistic missiles. And I'd say, have you looked at these YouTube videos of these underground cities? These things go for tens, if not hundreds of miles underground. They've got missile after missile after missile after missile stacked, as well as mobile launchers. They have a tremendous capability to retaliate against us. And we discounted it. We assumed that we had the ability to defeat them. And, look, it takes it a little bit outside of this sphere, but let's go back and review what the U.S. military officers who planned the Ukrainian counteroffensive in June of 2023, what they came up with. They came up with an abortion of a plan that failed, even though they were confidently predicting that they'd be at the Sea of Azov by August of 2023. It didn't happen. So you've got that same sort of, I call it magical thinking, that people who've never actually had to fight somebody that their own size and weight are now discovering, whoops, they bit off more than they could chew.
I've just gotten footage. I think it's unconfirmed. There's no way this is true. apparently, and this is some, I don't know what the source is. This is a source called Al Mahar, and allegedly it shows protests in Bahrain. Now, I want to add my thoughts. I don't think this is true.
Oh no, why don't you
These
think
countries
it's
don't
true?
see. The Gulf countries rarely see protests.
But you know
I'm going
why?
to ask my team to verify
You-
because that would be pretty significant.
Well, you know why Bahrain is different. Bahrain is 80% Shia. In Saudi Arabia and Qatar and United Arab Emirates, it's 15 to 20% Shia. So what you have in Bahrain is a vast majority are Shia. And we've seen similar protests in Baghdad, in Pakistan. So the Val Ali Sistani reportedly had vowed that there would be a jihad and intifada against the West if the Ayatollah Khamenei was killed, which he was. So
That's a good point. I didn't know Bahrain is as a significant amount as Shiite. I've asked the team to look into this and verify it. But yeah, if true, that will be pretty significant.
Yeah. Well, there have been videos of seeing Bahrainis cheering the destruction of the U.S. naval facility. So, like I said, I checked. I'm confident that on my facts here because I checked them out the other day. I was asked the question. I wasn't quite sure, and I was actually surprised to discover 80% of the Bahraini population is Shia Muslims. So that's significant, and Iran has a lot of support there.
Yeah, I'll let you know as soon as I get more information on this because that's unexpected. Going back to the military aspect of it, something I'm really trying to understand is what could Iran do next, and what are they doing do you think they will stop doing so? For example, they are striking Gulf countries. Saudi has threatened or has announced that they may join the fight and start defending themselves, i.e. striking Iran. We've seen a meeting between the Gulf nations. Now we've seen Starmer wanting to support the US or offer their bases to the US. It's not that significant of a change in the American military capabilities and being able to use British bases, but it's symbolic. So what I was trying to understand, will Iran reduce the amount of attacks on non-US military facilities in the Gulf nations, i.e. the buildings, the airports? Will Iran change the strategy there? Or will they do the opposite? And will they go to the next stage, and that is striking oil refineries? They've already struck ports, strike airports again, and strike symbolic locations like the Burj in Dubai, that there was a drone allegedly heading towards the Burj that was intercepted, or similar towers in Bahrain or Saudi.
No, I think right now what Iran has tried to do in the Gulf states is exclusively target U.S. military installations. They hit one building, for example, that reportedly was used to house U.S. naval officers in Bahrain. They are not. I don't anticipate that they will expand the war to attacking civilian targets in the Gulf states. At least Arakshi as well as Larijani have made that pretty clear that they're going after the military targets. But if Saudis decide to enter the war, and if Iranian oil fields are attacked by the West, then they will take out the Saudi oil fields. And so this will, because Iran's fighting for its existence. Its very existence is at stake now. The West has made no more pretense of trying to get along with it. And I believe with Iran's ample supply of ballistic missiles, and their production facilities are underground. And even though reportedly last night the U.S. flew some B-2 bombers over to try to blow up some of these underground sites, it's questionable whether or not that succeeded. And even if they succeeded in striking a couple of targets, Iran is a big country, and there's always limitations on U.S. military power. So I think Iran's going to continue this, and the United States is going to be begging for it to stop. And at that point, I could imagine Iran said, "You want us to stop? You can start by lifting the economic sanctions on us. That ends, and you're going to withdraw support for the Mujahideen al-Khalq. You're no longer going to continue to house them, protect them, and send them to carry out terrorist
attacks."
attacks. Yeah,
the main opposition
MEK
group that was a terrorist group in Iran. You see me looking down, by the way. I apologize. I'm just communicating with the teams on that Bahrain footage seems to be true. according to the team. BBC and NPR have confirmed it. So, I think we're seeing a reaction to the death of Khamenei. And then, again, look at the footage. If you can play this, please, again, Lisa, if you can play that footage on screen. This is not a peaceful demonstration. These men are burning down a building by the looks of it. You can see there, and that's in Bahrain. Now, I'm not sure how common. Yeah, I'm not sure how common that is in Bahrain. I just don't. The Gulf nations are known for being very stable. Not all Gulf nations are equally as stable. Bahrain is very different to Qatar. Is very different to Saudi. Very different to Dubai and Oman. But one similarity or similar theme among them is they're known for stability and safety and lack of protest. They've got very low tolerance for protests. Maybe I would ask you: do you know have we seen similar protests in the past in Bahrain? Do you remember any at all?
No. So this is, they've crossed the line. The killing of Khamenei has crossed the line. And again, I return to what as we talked about earlier. How does it make sense to kill the one guy in Iran who has been telling Iran we're not going to have a nuclear weapon because it's a sin against God, against Allah? And the one guy. And we said, no, we'll kill him. So right away, you've killed the one guy who may have prevented Iran up to this point from developing a nuke. I would not be surprised that the next Ayatollah to take over will reverse that fatwa by Khamenei and say that in light of these repeated attacks on Iran, we have no choice but to develop a nuclear weapon to protect ourselves. And they can do it. They'll be able to do it. And this will all be created by the West. They've created a self-fulfilling prophecy.
There's already talks of him being more radical, a more radical supreme leader. Just imagine that all this effort to kill a supreme leader for someone that's more radical, that's more anti-US, that's maybe more pro-nuclear weapons, comes and takes power. Now, the counter argument would be like, well, if he's going to come in with that stance, we'll kill him again, and we'll keep killing them until we get someone that's more similar to the vice president that became the president of Sanchez in Venezuela.
Delcy Rodriguez.
Delcy Rodriguez. Delcy Rodriguez, not Sanchez. Delcy Rodriguez, who's more open to working with the US than her predecessor. That would be the counter argument, but I just don't think that's a wise strategy. You don't just they're killing strategies. That's how you end up in a forever war.
Yeah, well, Khamenei was not, he's portrayed as this vicious, violent man, and we're told the repeated lie that Iran is the number one sponsor of terrorism. It's objectively not true, Mario. You need only look at the U.S. State Department's annual report on terrorism. It was called Patterns of Global Terrorism from 1990 through 2003. And then starting in 2004, it became known as Country Reports on Terrorism. In most of those reports, they'd have a statistical annex listing which groups, who were actually killing people, who were the most violent terrorist groups. So over the years, the stats show over 80% of the groups responsible for killing and the most deaths, etc., are Sunni groups that have been sponsored by individuals in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates. Not a one was sponsored by Israel, by Iran. And in fact, when you look at, I also went and looked at the statistics that are produced by Israel's foreign ministry. They're published on their website. They start in August of 2000 and they go through current day.
You say Israel's foreign ministry?
Israel's foreign ministry. So they list every attack by the Palestinians against the Israelis over that time frame. Total of 672 terrorist attacks from August of 2000 through April 26, because that's when I pulled this data. So I haven't updated the data since then, but there's been no significant change. But a total of 672 terrorist attacks in that time frame. Only 105 are attributed to Hamas. So I'm not saying Hamas has never committed a terrorist attack, but when the total death toll again for all those 672 attacks was less than 1,500 over a 24-year period. Meanwhile, here's Israel killing over 70,000 Palestinians, and confirmed by the Israeli military itself just 2 weeks ago. So I mean, it's this lie that Iran is sponsoring terrorism. Iran went in to assist Bashar al-Assad fight against these radical Islamists, these Sunnis, who we allege attacked the United States on 9/11 back in 2001. That's who Iran was fighting. And instead, we claimed Iran was creating, human rights abuses. Meanwhile, what does the West do? The West funds al-Jilani, Mohammed al-Jilani, and the West then promotes al-Jilani, changes his name, al-Shara, puts him in charge of Syria. And he's a bona fide Sunni jihadist terrorist that his group was responsible for more than 1,000 deaths over a 3-year period.
So that's ironic. Yeah, that's a very good point. You've got a former Al-Qaeda leader coming in as a president of Syria, replacing Assad, who was secular, more secular at least. And then you have the Iranian regime being deposed, the supreme leader being assassinated, and a more hardline leader most likely going to take his place. And also it's important to remember that the supreme leader was killed with his grandkids. I think anyone calling, or Trump calling for people to go on the streets, a lot of people are happy the supreme leader is dead now. Defining a lot is impossible. But there is a lot of videos coming out of Iran of people celebrating. How many? We don't know. But even if there's a lot, I know you disagree, Larry, but even if there's a lot, I find it hard to imagine them going on the streets and calling for the fall of the regime when they've seen their leader, even if they dislike him, get assassinated by a country they hate more than their leader. So let's say the supreme leader is hated. I think he is. I think you disagree. You think he's more loved there. Yes. I'll let you comment on that. But even if he is hated, guess who they hate more? Israel and the US, especially Israel. And that country is the one that assassinated that leader, along with, allegedly, with his grandkids. We don't know for sure. Not a good place to be if you want regime change, if you want people to win the hearts and minds of people. That's not how to do it.
So you were, I'm going back 25 years, and you were not an old man then, like I was. But I don't know if you recall the kind of division, political division, that existed in the United States on September 10th, 2001. It was significant.
Of course.
There was a lot of hatred towards George W. Bush, a lot of anger over what they saw as a stolen election. Boom. September 11th, 2001, this attack, and it terrified Americans across the political spectrum. September 12th, 2001, America was united. The partisan differences that had been so heated on September 10th had melted away. And that we were Americans. We weren't Republicans or Democrats or independents. We were Americans. That same phenomena is happening now in Iran. Same phenomena. That even some people who may not have been enamored of the Islamic Republic are now, they are being attacked. And this is a point I keep trying to make to people to help them understand. Because think of it in terms of your generation. I don't know how impactful the 9/11 attacks were for you in your life.
I remember the day very well.
Okay, so you were young, you were old enough that you remember, and it had an effect on you. Right now, prior to these attacks that took place in June, and now this latest round, the last traumatic exterior attack Iran suffered was 46 years ago, starting in 1980, with the Iraq attack on Iran. So think about it. The people, so let's go to 1987, 88. Use that as, 40 years. That means a 10-year-old boy back then, or a 10-year-old girl, they may have had some memory of it, but it wasn't something burned into their consciousness. It was those who were 18, 17, 18 years of age and up. Our friend Professor Morandi, Mohammed Sayed Morandi, he was a 17, 18-year-old boy then, and he enlisted in the army. He was wounded twice. It's had a profound effect on him. Now, what has happened by the West attacking Iran in this way, particularly when the narrative has been Iran was trying to negotiate. Iran was willing to make concessions. They weren't telling the West to screw off. We're not going to make concessions. And as long as the West said the primary concern, we don't want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. They said, we agree. We don't want to have a nuclear weapon. And Trump couldn't take yes for an answer.
There's more footage of people protesting in Bahrain. They'll have the team. Sorry, I'm watching it by myself. I'll have the team put it on screen now. I'm just so surprised by it. Really didn't expect this. And now this is more peaceful here, but if you can fast forward to show the people, actually keep playing. No need fast forward, just to see the amount of people. But keep it playing. It's gonna be there for 40 seconds. In the meantime, there's news coming out of Israel, Larry. The Israel War Cabinet was informed by the IDF that Iran intends to escalate and increase its missile attacks, and there is, quote, no sign of an end in sight yet.
Yeah. Yeah, Iran's not going to.
Iran's ready for a long war, and
absolutely
that is supported by what we said earlier. Trump reached out through Italy and through one other country, according to Trita, or according to another source that Trita mentioned, and another country asking Iran for a ceasefire, or at least discussions for a ceasefire, and Iran refused. And here we are now, Israel saying that Iran intends to escalate and increase its missiles. Maybe you can define what escalate means. Is that just more missiles, more targets? If you were Iran, how would you escalate?
I would take the hypersonic missiles. I would target them on the nuclear site in southern Israel. I would target every single military base, every oil refinery, every port. All you got to do is knock out 2 ports to Israel, and then make it impossible for products to be landed there. Number one, the oil refineries also near Haifa and Tel Aviv. Take those out. Eliminate and destroy every intelligence organization, Unit 8200, and the Ministry of Defense. Iran's got that capability.
Is that to escalate to Israel or escalate in general? Because wouldn't it be wiser to target U.S. bases instead, which are, I don't know if they're more protected than Israel. I don't think so. I think the Iron Dome is the strongest in the region.
I was to say, actually,
but they're a smaller target. The U.S. bases are a smaller target.
I think they've largely been destroyed or decimated up to this point. We saw an attack in Dubai yesterday. Again, we're not even 48 hours into this war. Okay, it's less than 48 hours so far. That Iran hit the CIA headquarters in Dubai. The station, and I don't know if any personnel were in there when it hit, but whatever files and such were there, they're destroyed. So it may be that as Israel now has weakened the U.S. presence in the Gulf, and like the signs we're seeing out of Bahrain, the importance of that naval facility was the destroyers, once they shot all of their missiles, they could get in there within a day, maybe day and a half, and get refurbished, reloaded, and then back to business. Now they got to go to Diego Garcia, which from southern southern Arabian Sea is at least a 3.5 days journey, and then 3.5 days back. So U.S. can't sustain a presence, is what I'm saying.
Let me play this clip now of Trump's speech. I'm going to get this very short 15 to 20 second clip, and I want you to break down what we talked about, what Iran's strategy is if they want to escalate, targeting U.S. bases, which Israeli targets to also hit, and maybe Gulf targets as well. Not sure if they're going to change their strategy when it comes to the Gulf region. But if you look at that clip by Trump, if Lisa, you can play that with the audio, please. Essentially, I'll read out what he said. I call upon all Iranian patriots who yearn for freedom to seize this moment, to be brave, be bold, be heroic, and take back your country. America is with you. I made a promise to you, and I'll fulfill that promise. So, it's what we've said earlier. We can play the clip. You can hear Trump's beautiful voice saying it instead of mine. Although I'm just not playing. But yeah, I've said what he said.
Yeah.
What do you think? What does that mean, Larry? Again, is that him preparing for a prolonged war? He said this war could last a month. We had Senator Cotton said the same thing. We had a senior U.S. official say that to Al Jazeera. Is Trump preparing us for a prolonged war and more U.S. casualties? Or is he laying the groundwork for a potential Trump chickens out again?
I think he already knows that we've got more casualties than have been reported. Right now, they're reporting 3 dead. I think that number is much higher. Number one. Number two, he is. I think he was convinced that the United States had a chance of really that regime change was in the works. And again, this is why this is so ironic. The United States created the propaganda that the vast majority of Iranians wanted to get rid of the Ayatollah. And then the United States turns around and, the Trump administration embraces that information, which we produced as propaganda, embraces it as true. This is a little, we've seen this phenomenon before during the Cuban Missile Crisis, back when, I was like 7 years old, you weren't even around. John F. Kennedy, when they first found out that these missiles are being built in Cuba, he's sitting there with his national security advisor, McGeorge Bundy, the Secretary of Defense, McNamara, and he's going, gee, I don't understand why Khrushchev would do this. He's acting as if we've put missiles into near to his country. And there was an awkward silence around the room. And finally, McGeorge Bundy spoke up and goes, Mr. President, we have deployed those nuclear missiles. And Kennedy was like, what? I think you've had a similar phenomena with Trump here, where he was told a certain story, a certain narrative about how weak the Iranians were, that all we got to do is just really punch them in the nose once.
By Netanyahu and Israeli intelligence?
Yep.
Or by his own administration, or both?
Both. I mean, it's really Netanyahu at foundation, because the CIA doesn't have independent assets in Iran. They rely upon Israel to give them, in my, recalling what I've been told by friends who've been involved with that effort. So he'd been suckered into it, believes it, and now they're starting to see it's not quite as easy, that every single one of these military facilities, they're having to close down. In Al Udeid, for example, you had what was called the CAOC, the Combined Air Operations Center. And in this Air Operations Center, you had, I would guess, at least 20 different countries represented. So it was a big operations center, computers, television screens. If you look up CAOC on the internet, you'll see a picture of, they've got several pictures of the workroom. And these were coordinating all air operations, all U.S. military attacks. They were doing deconfliction with the Russians in Syria, saying, okay, we're going to fly here. We'll stay to below this point at the Euphrates River, and you stay above that point, just so they wouldn't fly in and fight each other. Well, that's gone. And certainly not functioning now. So the United States is losing capability, and they've now lost their naval capability in Bahrain. Where are you going to go? Diego Garcia, much farther away. And it's not equipped the way that Bahrain was.
How effective are the defense systems of these armadas? What if Iran, why wouldn't Iran stop attacking Israel, stop attacking the Gulf states, and focus all their might, all their missiles, all their capabilities, even the hypersonics, purely on the armadas? Isn't that the best way to inflict the most casualties for the US and force Trump, for political survival for the midterms, to end the war? Isn't that the best way to cause Trump to end the war, by causing American casualties?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the Iranians,
maybe I'm not sure if militarily it makes sense. I'm not sure if the missiles are, because Iran is a massive country, 4 times the size of Iraq. Maybe the missiles are in different locations, and not all these locations could hit the aircraft carrier. So I'm not an expert, obviously, but just a thought on the reason I'm trying to think of these scenarios is trying to understand what Iran could do next as this war drags on, because it feels that we're reaching different stages, but a lot quicker than, instead of a new stage every 3-4 days, it's a new stage every 12 hours.
Yeah, well, if you recall what happened in June, that decapitation attack took place in the morning, and it really caused some confusion, command breakdown, etc. in Iran. And yet, within 10 hours, 12 hours, they were already up and running and beginning to launch missiles and drones at Israel. Now, at the time, they were meticulous about avoiding attacking U.S. military installations. They targeted exclusively Israel. And it was day after, it was just like, hey, we're going to continue to launch missiles around the clock. They didn't have just one period. So we'll do it now, take a break, and come back. No, they're operating 24/7. And they understand that this is an attrition war. The West is betting on Iran only having, less than 3,000 missiles. I maintain that they may have upwards of 20,000.
Oh.
And with that amount, they're going to be able to continue. They're going to continue draining and depleting the air defense capabilities of both the U.S. and Israel, and will continue to destroy parts of those military facilities in the Persian Gulf.
Isn't that an argument? Isn't that the argument that what you're saying means the war will not last too long? Because we know Iran doesn't want war. They've been very clear from the get-go. They've been clear. I've said this before. The foreign minister was clear on day one as Iran was being struck and Khamenei's compound was struck. Maybe they knew already he was killed by then. And he was talking about diplomacy, and diplomacy still has opportunity, and we don't want war on the day of the war. So if Iran doesn't want the war, and the US, if what you're saying is true, would want an off-ramp, that seems like the perfect combination for an early end to this conflict.
Well, I think if there is an off-ramp, it'll come courtesy of Russia and China. Russia and China.
I'd love to know more their involvement.
So
in this.
Russia and China with their relationship with Iran. Iran is a critical location for the future of BRICS, because it's both the north-south economic corridor as well as the new Silk Road, which runs east-west. So I could see Russia and China actually brokering a deal with Trump. But the deal was going to entail that all these sanctions have to, the sanctions come off of Iran, that they will guarantee Iran's not going to build a nuclear weapon, but that the United States is also going to have to reduce its military presence in the Gulf. So I could see them intervening. Trump is supposed to meet with Xi end of March. And so I think by then, I fully anticipate Iran will continue to hit Israeli targets through the month of March for at least the next 4 weeks.
What is Xi's role in all this? Because we've heard that China is offering intelligence for Iran. Iran would not even be able to locate those aircraft carriers without Chinese satellite images. You've seen that reporting.
Yeah.
And we also know in Russia, they've provided the helicopters to Iran. Obviously, those helicopters are not there to target the US or Israel. They're there to target internal separatist groups or any internal Mossad members, or if there's any special forces that are sent into Iran. So that's what the helicopters are there. And there's also the shoulder rocket launchers that Russia supplied Iran in the last few months. So maybe give us a bit more insight into what role China and Russia will play in this war compared to the 12-day war, beyond just diplomatic rhetoric.
Yeah, they've apparently, I thought that they would have provided better air defense capabilities. That has not panned out so far, and I don't know the reason for that. But they have clearly provided intelligence that's being used by Iran for targeting, and China was very upfront about providing the locations of air defense systems at the various bases in U.S. bases in the Persian Gulf, like Al Udeid and at Prince Sultan in Saudi Arabia. So I can see very well that they will continue to provide support, but can give Trump an off-ramp. Trump, he is not going to be able to sustain this militarily. And the reason for that is it's going to be a combination that some of the critical weapon systems that are needed to stay in the fight, they're going to run out. They will deplete their stores. And, they're going to try to keep some reserves intact in the event that they, quote, need to confront China. So, that's another, piece hanging in the background. This is going to have definite spillover for Ukraine. Ukraine is definitely on the back burner as far as the United States is concerned. And if Europe gets involved, it's going to be even worse for Ukraine. Yeah. So this is, we got a lot of moving pieces on this global chessboard, and it's not just one dimensional. It's 3-dimensional.
And if oil prices go up, Russia's a winner in all this. Like, Russia will be sitting there watching this. This is a blessing from God, from Russia. The US is distracted from Ukraine. US munitions are depleted because of this war, and oil prices are up, so more money for their coffers. So from a geopolitical perspective, this is terrible for Ukraine, and this is Sorry, getting a bit of a cough.
No,
This
that's
is
all right.
great for China as well. China wants to, Taiwan has been in their eyes for years now, for as far as we remember. And the more distracted the US there, the easier the path. And also, it's harder to make an argument against China unifying with Taiwan when you've got the US removing a dictator or a regime change or president or whatever in Venezuela, striking Nigeria, supporting Ukraine. That's a different story. It wasn't initiated by the US unless you go back to historically, but it's a bit different to Iran. Iran striking the regime for a regime change. So what happened with Syria? If you put all these together, and then you go and make an argument on following international law to China,
Yeah, well,
you'd look like a fool.
The United States has already made it clear it doesn't believe in international law. It's not just Trump that said it; it's Marco Rubio that said it. I think this has done. Trump's decision to allow this attack to go forward has profoundly damaged his ability to negotiate anything internationally. Going forward, what is Vladimir Putin going to say when Steve Witkoff comes up and says, "Hey, we really need to come see you"? Putin will probably say, "Why would I want to talk to you? Your word means nothing. You made promises and assurances to the Russians to the Iranians that you failed to deliver on. You've made us multiple promises. You still haven't delivered on those. No, you bring us something concrete of substance, or we have nothing to talk about." That's where this is headed, I think.
Larry, I was planning to do this for at least another half an hour at least, but my cough is getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Pleasure to speak to you as always. Your analysis is great, and I'd love to do this again when my cough eases up. I need a break.
Get some hot chicken soup and some hot tea with lemon.
Will do, Larry. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much.
All right,
Thank you,
my
everyone.
friend. Bye-bye.